There is a small, dusty stone room on the side of a house in Nazareth that no one ever talks about. It has 3 rough limestone walls, a wooden bench along one side, a row of iron tools hanging on wooden pegs. The floor is scattered with wood shavings and stone dust. The smell is sawdust, limestone, olive oil rubbed into wooden handles, and the faint metallic tang of iron chisels sharpened that morning. It is approximately 12 feet by 15 feet. It is the most important room in the history of the world. Because for 25 years, a man and a boy worked in this room together every single day. The man was nearly 40 when the boy was born. The boy was 3 when the man began teaching him. By the time the boy was 6, he was sitting on a small wooden stool watching. By the time he was 10, he was holding tools. By the time he was 13, he was working alongside his stepfather. By the time he was 18, he could run the whole workshop himself. The man's name was Joseph. The boy's name was Jesus. Joseph is the silent partner in salvation history. He says nothing in any of the 4 Gospels, not a single recorded word. He appears in maybe 10 total scenes in the New Testament. He dies somewhere between Jesus' 12th and 25th year, in a moment Scripture does not even bother to record. But for 25 years, he taught the Son of God how to be a man. Every parable Jesus would later tell about a builder, about a foundation, about a house, about a man counting the cost, about work and tools and stone and wood. All of it came from this small, dusty stone room. This is the story of what happened in that room. Built from the Gospels, from archaeology of first-century Nazareth, and from the earliest Christian traditions about a poor builder and the boy he raised as his own. By the end of this video, you will understand why Joseph's silent 25 years of teaching were more important than almost anything else in the early life of Jesus. He was 3 years old when his stepfather first brought him into the workshop. Picture the scene. The family had just returned from Egypt. They had walked back to the small stone house in Nazareth, the house Joseph had built before he ever met Mary. The toddler was holding his stepfather's hand. He was wearing a small cream-white linen tunic. His hair was dark. His olive skin was tanned from 2 years in the Nile Delta. He did not yet speak fluent Hebrew. He had grown up babbling in Coptic and Aramaic at the same time. Joseph led him to the side of the house. He opened the wooden door of the small workshop. The smell hit the toddler. Sawdust, stone dust, oil. Strange, sharp, completely new. Joseph lifted him up onto the wooden bench. He pointed to the wall, to the tools. He named them one at a time. Chisel, hammer, saw, plane, plumb line, square, awl, mallet. The toddler watched. He did not understand the words yet, but he understood the gesture. He understood that this room was important. He understood that the man who had carried him out of Bethlehem in the night, who had led him into Egypt, who had brought him home to Nazareth, was showing him something he wanted him to remember. Joseph said, "These are mine. Someday they will be yours." The toddler nodded. 25 years later, on the morning Joseph died, Jesus would walk into this workshop, pick up the chisel with the worn, smooth handle, and feel the weight of his stepfather's life in his own hand. He was 6 years old the first time Joseph let him hold a chisel. It was a small one, the smallest in the workshop. Joseph had been making it for him in the evenings for over a month, shaping the iron, fitting the wooden handle, sanding it smooth. He had not told the boy. He had not told Mary. Joseph led the boy to the workshop bench. He had set up a small piece of soft limestone, easy to cut. He picked up the small chisel he had made. He placed it in the boy's hand. The boy's hand was small. His grip was wrong. Joseph did not correct him with words. He took the boy's hand in his own, much larger, calloused one. He adjusted the fingers gently. He showed him, not by telling him, but by letting his own hand teach the boy's hand. Do not grip the chisel, he showed him. Let it rest. Let your hand support it. The chisel does the work. Your hand only guides it. The boy's hand relaxed. Joseph put the small mallet in his other hand. He guided the boy's first strike. A small, clean, ringing tone. A small chip of limestone fell to the floor. The boy looked up at his stepfather, astonished. Joseph smiled. He said, "That is your first cut. There will be 1,000,000 more." He was right. Over the next 20 years, the boy who would one day stand on a hillside above the Sea of Galilee and feed 5,000 people made literally millions of cuts in this small, dusty stone workshop. Every one of them held the same way. Loose, patient. The hand guiding, not gripping. Most people imagine Joseph as a carpenter making wooden furniture. He was not. Or rather, he was. But the word the Greek New Testament uses for his trade is tekton. It does not mean carpenter in the modern English sense. It means builder, craftsman, someone who works with hard materials. In first century Galilee, a tekton worked primarily with stone. Wood was scarce in the Galilean hills. Stone was everywhere. The houses of Nazareth, including Joseph's own house, were built of limestone. The walls were limestone. The door frames were stone. The lintels and thresholds were stone. The grinding stones used in every household courtyard were stone. The cisterns dug under houses for collecting rainwater were lined with stone. The tombs cut into the hills surrounding the village were stone. Joseph spent most of his working days cutting limestone, and he taught the boy how. By the time Jesus was 10 years old, he could identify the 3 types of limestone the workshop used: soft, medium, and hard. He could tell which was best for a doorframe, medium, which for a foundation, hard, which for a small decorative piece like a household altar, soft. By the time he was 15, he could quarry a small block from the limestone outcrop behind the workshop, split it cleanly along the natural grain, dress its faces, and finish it for installation in a neighbor's wall. He learned wood too. Joseph kept a small wood supply for doors, roof beams, furniture, yokes for oxen, plow shafts. Jesus learned the local species: sycamore, fig, olive, terebinth. He learned which wood was best for which purpose. But primarily, Jesus the builder was a stoneworker. When he later said, "Upon this rock I will build my church," he was using a phrase he had been hearing in this workshop for 25 years. He did not say much. Joseph was a quiet man. The Gospels record not a single word from him. Tradition is consistent that he was not a talker. But over 25 years of work, a father and son cannot work in complete silence. Joseph spoke. He just spoke in the way builders speak. He spoke about the work. Watch the grain of this stone. Do you see how it runs slightly to the right? Cut against the grain, and the stone will split where you do not want it to split. Test the squareness with the plumb line before you mortar. A wall that is 1 degree out of plumb at the foundation will be a hand's breadth out of plumb at the roof. Listen to the sound the chisel makes on the stone. A clean ringing tone means your angle is true. A dull thud means you are striking at the wrong angle and you are about to chip the stone the wrong way. Do not rush. The stone will be here tomorrow. Your hands will not be here forever. Work at the speed your hands can sustain for the next 40 years. A foundation laid in haste is a house that falls in a year. A foundation laid carefully is a house that stands for 100. The boy listened. 20 years later, the boy would stand on a hillside near Capernaum and say to a crowd of his neighbors, "Whoever hears these words of mine and acts on them is like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and beat against that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock." He was repeating his stepfather word for word. He was 12 when Joseph let him take a paying job alone. The neighbor needed a small repair on a door frame. A piece of limestone had cracked and needed replacing. Nothing complicated, a half-day's work. 2 silver denarii. Joseph told the neighbor that his son would do it. He did not tell Jesus until that morning. Picture the scene. Breakfast was finished. The Sabbath was over. Joseph stood up from the table. He looked at his stepson. He said, "Today you go to the house of Yochanan. He needs a new lintel stone. You will cut it. You will dress it. You will install it. He will pay you 2 denarii. Jesus stared at his stepfather. He had never done a job alone. Joseph had always been there. He said, "What if I do it wrong?" Joseph looked at him for a long moment. He said, "You will not do it wrong. I have taught you how to do it right. Today you do it without me. That is how you become a builder." Then he sat back down at the table. Jesus picked up his small leather tool roll. He walked across the village to the neighbor's house alone. He measured the lintel. He went to the limestone outcrop behind Joseph's workshop. He quarried a block. He split it. He dressed it. He carried it back to Yochanan's house on his own shoulders. He installed it. He smoothed the mortar. He inspected his work. Yochanan paid him 2 denarii. He walked home with the coins in his hand. He set them on the table in front of his stepfather. Joseph picked them up. He looked at the coins. He looked at his stepson. He smiled. Then he handed both coins back to him. He said, "You earned these. They are yours." He taught the boy patience. When a piece of stone cracked the wrong way after 3 hours of work, when the cut went bad and the whole block had to be discarded, Joseph did not yell. He did not curse. He did not blame anyone. He just looked at the ruined stone. He shrugged. He said, "That happens?" He picked up another block. He started over. The boy watched. He taught the boy honesty. When a customer paid too much by accident, when a neighbor handed over an extra denarius without realizing it, Joseph would walk back across the village and return the coin. He did not say anything moral about it. He just walked back. He gave it back. He came home. The boy watched. He taught the boy generosity. When a poor neighbor needed a door frame repaired and could not pay, Joseph did it anyway. He never asked for the money. He never sent his stepson to collect it later. He just did the work and walked home. The boy watched. He taught the boy mercy. When the village drunk, a man named Eleazar, who slept under olive trees and lived on the kindness of his neighbors, wandered into the workshop one morning and asked for a piece of bread. Joseph gave him bread. He did not lecture him. He did not refuse him because he'd refused him last week. He gave him bread every time, every week, for years. The boy watched. By the time Jesus was 20, he had absorbed the entire ethical system of his future ministry just by watching his stepfather work for 20 years. He had not been taught it in words. He had been taught it in hands and shoulders and the daily ordinary actions of a quiet man who did the right thing every day. for a quarter century. From age 12 to age 30, the Gospels record nothing about Jesus. 18 years of silence, no miracles, no teachings, no public appearances. The boy who had amazed the rabbis in the temple at age 12 disappears completely from the historical record for almost 2 decades. But the workshop knows what happened. Every morning he woke up. Every morning he washed his face. Every morning he ate breakfast with his stepfather. Every morning he walked to the workshop. Every morning he picked up a chisel. For 18 years, the same workshop, the same tools, the same village, the same neighbors, the same daily customers asking for the same daily small jobs. A new door frame here, a small wall repair there, a tombstone for a man who had died last week. Joseph aged. His back ached more every year. His chest tightened in the cold winter mornings. By the time Jesus was 20, Joseph was probably in his early 60s and getting tired. Jesus took on more of the work. By the time he was 25, he was running the workshop. Joseph would sit in the courtyard on the stone bench. He would still come into the workshop in the mornings. He would still inspect his stepson's work. He would still offer advice. But the hands cutting the stone were now the younger hands. Mary watched it from the doorway of the house, her older husband slowing down, her grown son taking over. The trade her husband had taught the boy was now feeding the family. The roles were quietly shifting in the way roles shift in every father-son relationship. Slowly, without anyone marking the moment. Until one day the son is the one carrying the work and the father is the one watching. There came a morning when Joseph did not come into the workshop. He was tired. He had been tired for months. His chest hurt in the mornings. He had told Mary the night before that he might not work today. She had told him to stay in bed. Jesus walked into the workshop alone that morning. He picked up the chisel his stepfather had given him on his 6th birthday. The small one Joseph had made for him in the evenings 20 years ago. The handle was worn smooth from 20 years of his hand. The iron was sharp. He set up the day's work. A door frame for a neighbor down the road. He cut, he shaped, he worked. Mary brought him lunch at midday. She did not say anything about Joseph. She just set the small wooden tray on the bench. She sat on a low stool nearby. She watched her son work. He looked up at her. He said, "How is he?" She said, "He is sleeping." She did not say what they both already knew, that this morning was the beginning of the end, that Joseph had not just been tired, that his chest pain was not getting better, that the man who had been the silent center of their small family for almost 30 years was beginning to die. Jesus did not say anything either. He just kept working. He cut the door frame. He shaped the lintel. He set the corner joints. He worked his stepfather's morning the way his stepfather had taught him to work. Joseph was inside the house. He could hear it, the small, bright ringing of the chisel, the pause between strikes, the clean, confident rhythm of a man who had been taught the trade by another man who had loved him. Joseph smiled in his sleep. His son knew the work. His son was a man. Step back. See what 25 years of workshop teaching actually built. Joseph gave him a name. Jesus would be called the carpenter's son by his neighbors for the rest of his life. Mark chapter 6 records the moment when Jesus returned to Nazareth at age 31 or 32 to teach in the synagogue. The villagers said, "Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon?" He was identified by his trade, the trade Joseph had given him. Joseph gave him a lineage, the line of King David, the royal line of Israel. The genealogy that opens the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke is Joseph's genealogy. Because Joseph claimed Jesus as his son. He gave him his name. He gave him his family tree. He gave him the legal status of son of David that would matter when crowds shouted it at him on Palm Sunday. Joseph gave him a trade. Every parable about builders, about foundations, about houses, about workers, about wages, about the daily life of a craftsman. All of it came from Joseph's workshop. Joseph gave him a model of fatherhood. When Jesus later taught his disciples to call God our Father, he was using a word he had been calling Joseph since he could speak. The kind of father who is patient, who is quiet, who teaches by example, who does not abandon, who does the right thing every day without fanfare for 25 years. Every word Jesus would say about a father in heaven who provides bread to his children. Every parable about a father who runs to welcome a lost son. Every gesture of fatherhood that runs through the whole New Testament. All of it was rooted in the man who had taught Jesus to hold a chisel. Joseph said nothing in Scripture, but he taught the Son of God for 25 years. And the Son of God spent the rest of his life teaching the world what his stepfather had quietly taught him in a small, dusty stone room on the side of a house in Nazareth. Joseph did not say anything in any of the 4 Gospels, not a single recorded word. But he did everything. He chose mercy when he could have called for Mary's death. He took a child that was not biologically his and raised him as his own. He led the family out of Bethlehem in the moonless dark to save the boy from Herod's soldiers. He took them into exile in Egypt. He brought them home to Nazareth. He built the boy a workshop. He taught him a trade. He sat at the Sabbath table every Friday night for 30 years and broke the bread. And every Christian father who has ever taken responsibility for a child not biologically his own is repeating what Joseph did. Every man who has ever taught a child a skill by patient, repeated daily example, without lectures, without showing off, without ever expecting praise, is doing what Joseph did. Every father who has ever stayed when staying was harder than leaving is doing what Joseph did. Every man who has ever passed down a craft, a discipline, a trade, a way of being in the world, by holding the hand of a child and showing them how, is doing what Joseph did. He is the patron saint of fathers, the patron saint of workers, the patron saint of carpenters and builders and tradesmen, the patron saint of the dying, because tradition says he died with Mary on one side of him and Jesus on the other, the most peaceful death any man could ask for. But more than any of that, he is the man who built the church. If this changed how you see Joseph, subscribe to the channel. Father's Day is coming. Share this with a father, with a stepfather, with a man who chose to take responsibility for a child that was not biologically his, with anyone who has ever wondered if the quiet, ordinary work of fatherhood matters. It matters. Joseph proves it matters. Tell me in the comments, what hit you hardest? The small chisel he made for the 6-year-old in the evenings? The lesson about how to hold a tool, loose, not gripped? The morning Jesus did his first paying job alone? Or the last day Joseph stayed in bed and listened to his son working in the workshop? I read every comment. I'll see you in the next one.